Welcome to Blessed Be the Breakdown, the podcast where I dissect The Handmaid's Tale, explore its themes, and uncover the real-world parallels that make it all the more terrifying. Before we dive in, I want to clarify something. While I often refer to The Handmaid's Tale show as a work of fiction, I am fully aware that the book and the underlying stories that inspired it are based on historical events. Margaret Atwood has repeatedly stated that she didn't invent anything in The Handmaid's Tale. Everything in Gilead has happened somewhere in the world at some point in time. That's why discussing these themes is so crucial. I do want to read something from the Handmaid's Tale actual novel. I believe this is a reprint because Atwood does reference the show. But in the introduction of the book, she is going over some questions that she is constantly asked. And one of the questions is The Handmaid's Tale a prediction? To this she says, "This is the third question I'm asked increasingly. As forces within American society seize power and enact decrees that embody what they were saying they wanted to do, even back in 1984, when I was writing the novel. No, it isn't a prediction because predicting the future isn't really possible. There are too many variables and unforeseen possibilities. Let's say it's an anti-prediction. If this future can be described in detail, maybe it won't happen. But such wishful thinking cannot be depended on either." Now, Season 2 of The Handmaid's Tale expands beyond Atwood's original novel, taking us deeper into Gilead's brutal regime. This season shows us what resistance looks like, both in small acts of defiance and large-scale rebellion. If you haven't watched Season 2 yet, I highly recommend it to fully understand what I'm discussing. So let's dive into Season 2. Before we get into the details of Season 2, let's compare its core themes with those of Season 1. In Season 1, we really saw the fall into oppression, the loss of freedom, how Gilead strips away personal liberties and creates a world of submission, the power of fear, surveillance, public punishments, and psychological control, religious justification for oppression, how scripture is twisted to enforce the ceremony and handmaid servitude, women as enforcers and victims, Serena Joy and Aunt Lydia's roles in maintaining the system, early sparks of rebellion with Moira's escape, Ofglen's resistance, and June's quiet defiance. In Season 2, we see the consequences of rebellion, these themes being psychological warfare and public spectacle, motherhood as a weapon, stripping identity and silencing women, the cost of belief in the system in Gilead, and the evolution of resistance. While Season 1 focused on establishing oppression, Season 2 shifts into survival, endurance, and the dangerous consequences of pushing back. Season 2 opens with one of the most visually stunning yet terrifying sequences in the series. The handmaids, muzzled and powerless, are herded into Fenway Park. As they step onto the field, their eyes lock onto a towering platform, one they are eventually forced onto. Nooses dangle above them, and the tension is suffocating. Then we hear the chilling words, "by his hand." The guard pulls the lever. The camera lingers on their faces. Anguish, terror, then relief. They drop, but not to their deaths. They are still alive. The torment was psychological, a cruel demonstration of Gilead's power. This moment is important because it immediately establishes the heightened brutality of Season 2. It's not just about control. It's about fear. The handmaids survive this time, but they are left knowing that their lives are completely in the hands of their oppressors. Fenway Park, once a symbol of American tradition, unity, and freedom, is now an execution ground. This transformation is a stark reminder of how easily places of joy and community can be turned into tools of oppression under authoritarian rule. After the brutal scene at Fenway, we are brought to the Red Center, where Gilead's cruelty is on full display. The handmaids face punishment for refusing to stone Janine. Forced to stand in the rain gripping stones and later shackled to a burning stove, this nightmarish scene reinforces the regime's relentless brutality. Amid this suffering, Aunt Lydia announces June's pregnancy, a moment that instantly sets her apart. While the others endure torment, June is brought inside, given food, and protected. The stark contrast is chilling. June eats for the sake of her baby, while another handmaid is burned in the background. It's a visual metaphor for survival in Gilead. Pregnancy grants privilege, while those without value to the regime suffer. This season also sees Aunt Lydia invoke Gilead's twisted ideology of freedom to versus freedom from. She justifies the regime's oppression by claiming it offers protection from chaos, crime, and immorality. Gilead presents itself as a savior of a crumbling world, enforcing strict control to restore moral purity, especially over women's bodies. However, this supposed freedom from comes at the cost of personal liberty. Women lose the freedom to make choices about their own lives, bodies, and futures. Aunt Lydia's speech highlights how authoritarian regimes manipulate fear to justify repression, masking tyranny as protection. June's first escape attempt is a powerful moment. She hides in an abandoned newspaper office, a former symbol of free speech and democracy, now just another relic of everything Gilead has erased. Nick plays a crucial role in her escape, taking enormous risks despite his limited power as a guardian. His love for June is one of the few genuine human connections in this world, contrasting starkly with the cold, transactional relationships that define Gilead. During her escape, we are introduced to the Econo people, the lower class of Gilead, who live in poverty and serve as a reminder that oppression extends beyond handmaids. Their existence underscores the regime's rigid social hierarchy, where citizens are valued solely by their utility to the state. A particularly striking moment occurs when Heather, the Econo wife sheltering June, says, "That's how they threaten us. If we're fruitful with the red dress and the wings, I don't know how you could give your baby up to somebody else." In which June replies, "I'm trying not to." Heather says, "I would die first." And then June comes back with, "Yeah, I used to think that too." This conversation encapsulates how Gilead erodes resistance over time. Heather's fierce determination to protect her child mirrors how June once felt. But June's wary response reveals how the relentless suffering of Gilead has worn her down. The system forces people into impossible choices between survival and their deepest convictions. June's recapture is swift and brutal. Aunt Lydia doesn't just punish her, she makes it clear that June's pregnancy is now the most important thing about her. June is now chained to the bed like of Wyatt was, and she is still holding on strongly and resists conforming back to Gilead's ways, even as Aunt Lydia urges her to reintegrate into the Waterford household. But despite Serena's resentment, June is sent back. It is during this time we slowly see Offred start to feel a sense of shame. When she finds out Ovglin has had her tongue removed for speaking out for Janine. And another pivotal moment is when Aunt Lydia confronts June with the lifeless body of Omar, a man executed by the regime for aiding in June's escape. She coldly informs June that Heather has been made a handmaid, and that Omar's son has been reassigned to another family and will never see his mother again. This brutal display serves as a chilling reminder of the high price of defiance. This scene devastates June, as Aunt Lydia asks her, "Whose fault is it?" And June replies, "My fault." And when Aunt Lydia asks why God allowed this to happen, June responds with, "To teach me a lesson." We clearly see she is making her feel responsible for the family's fate, and it's working. In an attempt to separate Offred and June, Aunt Lydia literally tells her June is at fault, not Offred, and she does not have to bear June's guilt. The emotional and psychological toll of witnessing the body shatters her resolve, further pushing her into submission. This harrowing encounter underscores the oppressive power Gilead exerts over its citizens, as June is forced to confront the regime's cruelty in its most personal form. At this point, we see Offred fully take over. As June begins to lose herself, flashbacks of her affair with Luke resurface, fueling self-doubt as she scrutinizes every past decision, wondering if she was always to blame. This marks a turning point in the season. June is no longer just surviving Gilead's cruelty. She's internalizing it. However, in true June fashion, it isn't long before the old June returns. One of the most haunting additions in Season 2 that we did see in Season 1, but we get more scenes of in Season 2, is the colonies, where Emily and the other unwomen are sent. These radioactive wastelands are Gilead's way of discarding women who can no longer serve their reproductive goals. But even here, resistance thrives. Emily, despite everything she has endured, finds ways to fight back. The women in the colonies take care of each other, offering whatever small kindness they can. It's a testament to human resilience. Oppression can break bodies, but it doesn't always break spirits. We are going to spend a good amount of time on Eden. Eden really represents a different kind of victim in the Handmaid's Tale, one who is not a rebel, but a true believer. Unlike June, Emily, or other women who resist Gilead's control, Eden fully embraces its teachings. She has been raised in this society and genuinely believes that submission, marriage, and duty to God will bring her fulfillment. However, her tragic fate proves that in Gilead, even the devout are not safe. Eden is introduced when she is abruptly assigned to be Nick's wife. At only 15 years old, she really represents an entire generation of girls who have been raised under Gilead's oppressive ideology. Unlike the older women who remember life before Gilead, Eden knows nothing else. She believes in the system wholeheartedly, convinced that her role as a wife is sacred and that obedience will lead to happiness. She is eager to please Nick, excited about their marriage, and genuinely confused when he remains distant. Nick is immediately uncomfortable with his forced marriage to Eden. He has no interest in her, not only because he loves June, but because he sees the cruelty of the system firsthand. Unlike Eden, Nick knows Gilead is built on lies and oppression, and he struggles with being placed in a position of power over someone so young and naive. Throughout their marriage, Nick avoids intimacy with Eden, which frustrates and confuses her. She directly confronts him, asking why he does not want her. Eden even talks to Offred about Nick possibly being a gender traitor. Another key moment we get from this is when Offred approaches Nick right after Eden comes to her about him being a gender traitor and tells him he needs to sleep with Eden. He refuses, he does not want to, and she coldly says, "Oh, you have to fuck somebody you don't want to? Isn't that just the worst?" This moment is full of irony and resentment as she throws Gilead's cruelty back at him, highlighting how handmaids endure this reality constantly. Eden's tragedy reaches its peak when she falls in love with a young guardian named Isaac. Unlike her cold and lifeless marriage, her connection with Isaac is passionate and real. She believes their love is pure, and in her mind, loving him should not be a crime. But in Gilead, personal desire is dangerous, especially for women. Eden and Isaac run away together, believing they can find a life outside of Gilead. However, their escape attempt is short-lived. They are captured and labeled as traitors, accused of violating Gilead's strict laws against adultery. The worst part is her parents were the ones that turned them in. Eden's final moments are among the most heartbreaking in Season 2. She and Isaac are sentenced to death by drowning. She is given a chance to repent, to renounce her actions and beg for forgiveness, but she refuses. Instead, she chooses to stay true to her love and her beliefs, quoting a Bible verse about love and faithfulness. As she is pushed into the water with weights tied to her ankles, it becomes painfully clear. Gilead does not protect its followers. It only punishes. Even though Eden was a devout believer, she was not safe. Her crime was not rebellion but love. Yet she was still deemed unworthy of mercy. Eden's execution deeply impacted those around her. Nick is devastated. Though he never loved Eden, he recognizes that she was just a child, an innocent girl who believed in something that ultimately betrayed her. Her death hardens him, reinforcing his quiet defiance against Gilead. Serena Joy is also shaken by Eden's execution. She sees Eden as a reflection of her younger self, an obedient, faithful woman who only wanted to do what was right. Eden's death forces Serena to confront the reality that Gilead does not reward devotion. This moment is one of the many that push Serena toward her eventual act of rebellion in the finale. Eden's story is a stark reminder that in Gilead, no one is safe, not even those who believe in it. Unlike June or Emily, Eden did not fight against the system, yet she was still crushed by it. Her tragic fate underscores one of the show's most terrifying truths. Gilead is not just a dystopia for rebels. It is a death trap for everyone, even its most faithful followers. Throughout Season 2, Gilead systematically strips individuals of their identity and silences women in the most literal ways. Handmaids are renamed, forced into servitude, and punished for even the smallest acts of defiance. Their pasts, careers, families, and any meaningful connections outside their assigned roles are erased. One of the most horrifying examples of this oppression is the brutal mutilation of a handmaid who speaks out against the stoning of Janine. Her tongue is cut out, not just as punishment, but as a warning to all handmaids. This violent act reinforces a chilling reality in Gilead. Women have no voice, no autonomy, and no control over their own lives. It is a physical manifestation of the broader oppression that dictates every aspect of their existence. Even Nick, despite his role as a guardian, struggles with the power he holds. He is both an enforcer and a prisoner of the system, constantly walking a fine line between survival and rebellion. His relationship with June and his role in aiding her escape reveal his growing disillusionment with Gilead, yet even he cannot fully escape its rigid structures. This theme of stripping identity and suppressing opposition is not unique to Gilead. It has happened throughout history, from women being denied education to political prisoners losing their names and voices. Oppressive regimes have always relied on these tactics to maintain control. The Handmaid's Tale is a chilling reminder that silencing people is often the first step towards erasing them entirely. We see one of the most shocking acts of resistance in Season 2, and it occurs when a handmaid detonates a bomb inside the newly built Red Center. This attack marks a turning point, proving that resistance is not just growing in Gilead, it is willing to strike at the very heart of Gilead's power. The explosion kills several high-ranking officials and sends shockwaves through the regime. But beyond the immediate destruction, the attack makes a bold statement. Handmaids, the very women Gilead seeks to control, are willing to die rather than submit. The bombing forces the regime to tighten surveillance and retaliate harshly, reinforcing the brutal reality that every act of rebellion comes with devastating consequences. It is this bombing that puts Commander Waterford in the hospital. And while he is in the hospital, Serena steps up and takes over some duties, even though she is not allowed to. Seemingly, Fred gave her the go-ahead. However, when the commander recovers and discovers Serena's transgressions about enlisting the help of a female doctor without him knowing, he wastes no time in reasserting his dominance. In a brutal display of control, he punishes Serena in front of Offred, whipping her as she silently endures pain. Offred is forced to witness the cruelty and is reminded that despite Serena's power over her, she too is a prisoner of the system she helped create. In this season, we also see Serena get a finger taken off for reading in front of the council. And these moments are significant because it strips Serena of her usual authority, placing her in a rare position of helplessness. For Offred, it is a sobering realization, despite Serena's privilege, she is not untouchable. But instead of forging solidarity, the punishment only deepens their divide. Offred sees Serena suffering, but there is no true alliance between them. Only the stark truth that in Gilead no woman is ever truly safe. As we know, one of the most powerful and disturbing themes in Season 2 and pretty much all of The Handmaid's Tale is how Gilead weaponizes motherhood, using it as a tool to control women at every level of society. Instead of being a source of love and empowerment, motherhood becomes a means of oppression, used to manipulate, punish, and break women's spirits. Offred's pregnancy, which should be a personal and joyous experience, is instead used as a leash to control her. She becomes even more valuable to Gilead as the bearer of a child, meaning her every move is monitored even closer. She cannot risk rebellion, escape, or disobedience without endangering her unborn baby. Even Serena Joy, who typically treats Offred with cruelty, becomes more possessive of her. During the baby shower, there is a noticeable shift in Serena and Offred's dynamic. Up until this point, Serena has primarily exerted control over Offred, treating her as a vessel for their child rather than an individual. She carefully crafts a nursery, surrounds herself with other wives, and participates in rituals meant to affirm her future role as a mother. Throughout Offred's pregnancy, we see Serena yearning for a biological connection to the baby. Her actions, such as touching Offred's stomach or laying in bed with her, suggest a desperate attempt to assert her place in the child's life. At the same time, this reinforces the power imbalance, as Offred is forced to endure Serena's possessiveness while having no agency over her own pregnancy. We do come to a point where Offred goes into what we think is labor, and it doesn't end up happening. Serena thinks that Offred has done this on purpose, so she concocts this plan for Fred to rape Offred in a desperate attempt to force her into labor. It is one of the most disturbing moments in the series. In an effort to, I believe, absolve his guilt, Fred arranges a meeting between Offred and her daughter. who is now called Agnes, and what should be a joyful reunion instead becomes heartbreaking. As a viewer, you feel a brief sense of relief that Offred's finally getting to see your child, only for that relief to be shattered when Agnes starts discussing her remembering her mom being hit on the head and asking if June went after her. But what really broke me as a viewer was, it's okay, I have new parents now. And that was just so heartbreaking. You can just see Offred's face. It was one of the saddest things I've seen this season. Within the season, we do get a flashback of when Moira chose to become a surrogate mother. A decision that highlights the stark contrast between reproductive autonomy in the pre-Gilead world and the complete lack of choice under the regime. Unlike the handmaids who were forced into surrogacy as a means of control, Moira's experience was one of agency. She made the decision on her own terms. This distinction is crucial because it reinforces one of the Handmaid's Tale's central themes, the difference between forced birth and reproductive freedom. Moira's past as a surrogate adds another layer to her resistance. She understands firsthand what it means to carry a child willingly and willingly give that child up, making Gilead's perversion of motherhood and surrogacy even more enraging. By the end of season 2, we circle back to Emily, who is now living in Commander Lawrence's home. And Commander Lawrence does not seem to have a traditional Gilead household. While there, she pushes Aunt Lydia down the stairs, injuring her. And in a shocking twist, instead of her being punished by Lawrence, he helps her escape, because he is essentially, as Aunt Lydia says, the architect of Gilead. So seeing him doing this is such a contrast to every other commander we've met. Going back to June, this season she has endured more than most could imagine. She has been tortured, manipulated, and forced into submission time and time again. But she has also grown stronger, more strategic, and more determined. In the finale, with the help of the Marthas and a growing underground resistance, June is given an opportunity to flee Gilead with her newborn daughter Nicole. After Serena Joy makes the shocking decision to let the baby go, realizing that Gilead is no place for a girl, June is handed a rare gift, a chance at freedom. She could finally escape, cross the border to Canada, and reunite with Luke and Moira. She could give Nicole a life beyond the horrors of Gilead. And for a moment, it seems like she will. Once she reaches the extraction point with Nicole in her arms, the way out is clear. It's there, it's right in front of her. But then she decides to stay, sending Nicole with Emily, who she shockingly sees there. June's decision to stay is gut-wrenching, not just because we've watched her suffer for 2 seasons, but because freedom is right there. However, something has changed in her. She is no longer just a mother trying to escape. She is a mother trying to save. Her older daughter, Hannah, is still in Gilead, and that simple, devastating truth outweighs everything else. Up until this point, June has been trapped in survival mode. But as she stands on the brink of escape, she realizes that leaving Gilead means leaving Hannah behind. She has already lost so much, but she refuses to accept that loss. She refuses to let Gilead win. In this moment, we see the final transformation of June Osborne. She is no longer a victim. She is no longer just a mother seeking safety. She is a woman ready to fight. Her eyes, filled with determination, tell us everything we need to know. She will not abandon her firstborn, no matter the cost. She has seen the cracks in the system, she knows there is a growing resistance, and now she is ready to be a part of it. Even if she made it to Canada, would she ever truly be free knowing that Hannah was still trapped? Would she ever be able to live with herself if she didn't fight? This moment marks the beginning of June as a revolutionary. It sets the stage for the next phase of her journey. Not as a handmaid, not as a runaway, but as a leader in the resistance. This scene doesn't end with hope, but with something more powerful: resolve. June is done running. She's ready to fight. There are some key flashbacks I do want to point out that happened this season. One being Luke signing for June's birth control, which is a subtle but powerful moment showing the erosion of women's autonomy even before Gilead. Though Luke means well, the system already treats June as incapable of making her own reproductive choices. Another key flashback we get is when June is at the hospital. After realizing she's missed a bunch of phone calls from Hannah being sick, and the nurse is grilling her about childcare and how she needs to take care of her child better, and that's essentially what the nurse was saying. And then we get the flashbacks of Emily when she's a professor at the school, and we see the restrictions are slowly starting to come in because Emily shows somebody a picture, or a student sees a picture of Emily and her wife and her son, really going towards the whole gender traitor restrictions that come up in Gilead. Now we're going to get into some real-world parallels, specifically with Trump, Musk, and America's oligarchy. In The Handmaid's Tale, Gilead is ruled by an elite class of powerful men, commanders who manipulate laws, suppress dissent, and shape society to serve their interests. Likewise, figures like Donald Trump and Elon Musk exemplify how billionaires and tech moguls have consolidated power in the US, reinforcing concerns that America is shifting toward an oligarchy, where the wealthy few control the many. Gilead's commanders govern with unchecked authority, controlling every aspect of life. Similarly, Trump's administration integrated numerous wealthy individuals into government roles, eroding traditional checks and balances. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has been granted significant influence over more than a dozen federal agencies, frustrating officials as he implements sweeping changes without coordination. Gilead dismantles existing institutions to reshape society in its image. Trump's actions similarly align with Project 2025, a conservative initiative designed to restructure the federal government. A time analysis found that nearly 2/3 of Trump's executive actions mirror Project 2025 recommendations, signaling a concerted effort to rewrite democratic norms. Musk's growing political influence exemplifies the increasing power of tech moguls in governance. Beyond his corporate ventures, he shapes policies on technology, space exploration, and environmental regulations. His influence has led to mass layoffs at federal agencies, raising concerns about his unchecked role in the public sector operations. The fusion of corporate and political power has polarized public opinion. While some view these shifts as necessary for economic growth, others warn of democratic erosion. This division highlights the importance of staying informed and engaged to protect civil liberties. The commanders of Gilead don't just rule by force, they demand loyalty, ideological devotion, and unquestioning praise, traits that both Trump and Musk have similarly cultivated. Like Commander Waterford, Trump idealizes a return to a mythical better past, his Make America Great Again slogan, just as Gilead enforces regressive policies under the guise of morality. His supporters, much like Gilead citizens, follow him with near religious devotion, even when his policies harm them. He attacks critics, silences opposition, and dismisses negative news as fake, paralleling Gilead's tight control over public narratives. And then we have Musk. As the owner of X, Musk shapes information flow, suppresses critics, and amplifies his own ideology, mirroring Gilead's media control. He reinstates extremists while silencing dissenters, echoing Gilead's selective censorship. His devoted following aggressively defends him, much like Gilead's loyalists revere their commanders despite their abuses. Both Trump and Musk wield unchecked power, control public speech, and maintain a fiercely loyal base, hallmarks of authoritarian leadership. One of Gilead's key concerns, or the reason really for everything, is repopulating. Musk warns of population collapse and encourages the wealthy to have more children, eerily resembling Gilead's focus on worthy bloodlines. I will admit that does seem like a bit of a reach, but from an outside perspective, you can see where that can kind of correlate. With at least 11 children, he has publicly endorsed the idea that elite men should procreate more to preserve civilization. While the US has not fully descended into a dystopia, the concentration of power among billionaires, erosion of workers' rights, suppression of free speech, and control over women's bodies suggests an alarming shift towards oligarchy and authoritarianism. If left unchecked, these trends could push America closer to a real-life version of Gilead, where democracy is a facade, power belongs to the elite, and ordinary people struggle under their rule. In some examples of some things in other countries, authoritarian regimes often use public displays of power to create fear and suppress differences of opinion. In both China and North Korea, mass rallies and state-sponsored propaganda are essential tools for fostering loyalty to the government and suppressing any form of opposition. In China, events such as the National Day celebrations are strategically used to promote the unity and strength of the Communist Party, with media outlets reinforcing loyalty to the leadership and focusing on national successes. Similarly, North Korea organizes large military parades and public events to glorify the ruling Kim family, presenting the country as self-sufficient while portraying external threats as a justification for the regime's power. Propaganda in both nations helps to emphasize national unity and control the narrative to shape public perception. Both regimes also utilize extensive measures to eliminate dissent and consolidate their power. In China, censorship, widespread surveillance, and suppression of activists ensure that opposition voices are silenced. With the population only exposed to state-sanctioned information, in North Korea, the government exerts absolute control over the media, education, and communications, leaving no space for dissent, with any opposition being harshly punished. The combination of mass rallies and state propaganda serve to build a strong sense of nationalism and collective identity, deterring criticism and reinforcing the authority of the ruling leadership through psychological tactics that ensure their grip on power. There are a few things that I did want to touch on before I get to my final thoughts here. If you haven't seen the video that the White House put on X, I didn't watch it on X, I actually saw it on TikTok. But you should go watch it. I actually don't. It's very sad. I'll just give you the information. You can do with it what you will if you haven't seen it already. But the White House released a deportation ASMR video. I'll let that sink in for a second. A deportation ASMR video. That is so crazy. What type of world are we living in where we are so inhumane towards other humans that we think that's okay? And then on Valentine's Day, I don't know, once again, if you've seen the Valentine's Day card that was circulating from the White House, but if you haven't, it's about deportation. And it is very sad. Roses are red, violets are blue. Come here illegally and we'll deport you. This is just ridiculous. It's no longer political stances on things or thinking, one thing's right or one thing's not. It is inhumane activity, no regard for other human life. It is truly sad the world we're living in today, and I can only hope that something will happen and make it better. We are truly living in sad times, and some of the things we are seeing from so-called political leaders are just shocking. I would never in my lifetime think I would see something like this, and that is so sad. I want to share a clip from Australian politician Nick McKim. As a current member of the Australian Senate, he offers a sobering perspective on America's slide into fascism.
If you can't see the slide into fascism that's currently happening in the United States, you are simply not paying attention. At Donald Trump's inauguration, as the billionaire oligarchs lined up to pay their obeisance, the biggest of them all, the most highest profile of them all, the person with probably the biggest social media reach in the world, in part because he owns one of the biggest social media platforms in the world, Elon Musk, literally gave a Nazi salute at the president's inauguration. And for people who are going to try to argue that it wasn't actually a Nazi salute, I'll say this. If you're one of the highest profile people in the world and a massive global debate erupts about whether or not you gave a Nazi salute and you don't come out and say it wasn't a Nazi salute, then it was a Nazi salute. It was a Nazi salute. The United States is sliding into fascism under Donald Trump. And it is marginalised communities who are going to pay the price. Black-skinned and brown-skinned people, migrants in the US, women in the US, transgender and queer folks in the US. They're going to be persecuted and they're going to be demonised, blamed for all the problems of the day. And you know what else is going to pay the price? Nature is going to pay the price under his drill baby drill policies of destroying nature. Climate is going to pay the price, as we're already seeing a withdrawal from global climate action. President Trump is a disaster for humanity. He belongs behind bars, not in the Oval Office.
Gilead is terrifying because it's built on real-world oppression. The themes of season 2, like forced birth, censorship, and silencing women, are all things we are seeing happening today. So what can we do? Stay informed, speak out, challenge policies that strip people of their rights. Resistance isn't just a theme in The Handmaid's Tale. It's a necessity in real life. I really want to thank everybody for all the support thus far. I'm doing my best to put out quality content. I do make mistakes sometimes, so feel free to leave me a comment if there's something that I got wrong, and I will do my best to correct it. Thank you for tuning in to Blessed Be the Breakdown. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, rate, and share the podcast. Join the discussion on Instagram and TikTok, and let me know your thoughts on Season 2. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and blessed be the fight.